Good evening, everyone. Welcome to EduTALK. EduTALK is a weekly virtual talk show created out of the need for a global learning community, and we focus on topics in education that directly impact Caribbean nations and Caribbean nationals working across the globe. EduTALK features teachers, principals, business leaders, dignitaries, and administrators, as well as sometimes students who share their ideas and expertise on critical topics facing education today with a common goal of moving education forward and our students upward. I am your host, and I am Dr. Dyce. I'm the CEO and founder of Education Solutions International, ESI. Please visit our website at edusolutionsintl.org for more information. Now, our talk this evening is about school comparison. When we compare schools, what exactly are we looking for? How do we compare them? And hence the little slogan that we coined I said, comparing schools, apples and oranges, because it's really apples and oranges because they're so different, the different types of schools. So this is our first part of a two-part series that we're going to talk about with school comparing, and looking at the different areas in which we find some similarities and then a whole lot of differences. And I invite Mrs. Judy Villeneuve-Dyce to be on with us this evening to talk about this, because she's an expert in school leadership, administrative work with schools as a policy director, policy and engagement director at the DOE. And she is on here as the title, the CFO and the co-founder of ESI. So we're practically partners in this. Judy, when you hear the term comparing schools, I know you have a lot to say about different types of schools across the globe. What are you thinking of in a nutshell?
Well, I mean, it's hard not to just reflect on the experiences that I had as a child in school myself. I had been to many, many schools, unfortunately, as a result of my mom looking for the right fit for me. So I happen to know um, personally that schools are not equal, right? And then that, of course, spawned my interest in education and trying to go into education as a career to try to make, a contribution to improving the school experience, because it's very monumental in forming who it is that you become. And that's good even when it's a negative experience, because like me, it motivated me, right? As far as a career, some negative experiences. So my experiences are a combination of schooling in Jamaica and schooling in the United States. My education in Jamaica was when I was very, very young. But I really did learn a lot, because during the time that I was there, my spelling was excellent when I came to, first grade in the United States. The problem, however, is that I had learned to spell the British way. So I remember the first time I was in a US school, and I was very confident about my ability to spell, but I remember seeing all these X's across my writing when I was using O-U-R instead of O-R.
Like
And it
in
was
honor
shocking. Exactly, exactly.
and
And I
neighbor.
Right. And I didn't understand why it was wrong.
Hmm.
And they didn't explain it to me, and they didn't take into consideration that I was coming from another country. So that was my first, I guess I could say, educational defeat. And I felt defeated because of the way that I learned that I was doing something incorrectly. So I ended up as a child going through different education systems, a private school, public schools and Catholic schools, and seeing how distinctly different that they are. Catholic schools, obviously, it's a lot of Catholic instruction, a lot of structure around proper behavior, how to compose yourself. So that etiquette that I think is very fundamental to knowing how to treat other people, I thought Catholic school was excellent at that, as well as the education. The public school I happen to be in, I've learned later that there are some public schools that are excellent here in the United States. For the most part, those suburban communities where people pay high taxes for their homes, that money goes towards excellent school systems. So you'll always have excellent school systems in these rural communities, whereas in cities, where you don't have housing taxes and property taxes, and you're, reliant a lot on just the money that you get from the government, you have a lot of teachers paying out of pocket for even resources. And I remember my mother was changing careers, and I stayed in a public school for only 6 months. And being in that public school, even though I got straight A's there, it put me a year behind in
Mm.
private school. I mean, it's a dramatic, I mean, I couldn't believe it. A year behind in a private school compared to what, was supposed to be above average in the public school. So it took me a while, like a year, before I could work my way into getting back into my right grade, which became my only goal, to get
Mm.
back into my right grade. But that was in a private school where, of course, you learned French, and then you had, Latin, and you also did public service. So you ended up learning how the time that you take to do something good for other people, how that makes you feel good, how that improves the lives of the people you're doing it for. So you get to learn the value of giving, as well as the value of education. And then it became an international education, right? Because now we're learning Latin so that we'll be better in science. Because for those of us who may go into medicine, they said that that was a necessary foundation. French for those of us, and Spanish and Chinese at the time, for those of us who want to travel internationally. So the mentality around education in private school was international. So every single school was completely different as far as its focus. But for me, funny enough, I feel like I got a more comprehensive experience having gone to each and every one of them, because you don't get the same thing from every single experience, right? Public school, I have to say, just dealing with bullies, having to work through the incompetence, I guess, and the of the type of education that you learn. I got in trouble for doing my work too quickly.
Mm.
Because obviously that has to do with the teacher not being able to manage a classroom where she needed differentiated instruction ability to be able to teach kids that were more advanced versus the ones who were less advanced. So all of these were my foundation, actually, that led me to wanting to work in education and to contribute in education, because I know for a fact that a child that never got an opportunity to go to anywhere but a poor performing public school will be way behind in life at the end of their career, at the end of their education career, as a result of these major differences. I'm very
Yeah.
curious to hear what your experiences have been.
You as you talk, I'm putting myself in the same position, but the schools that I've gone to, the teachers were trying teachers, and some teachers were very trying, even though it's low, what do you call it? Low socioeconomic areas, that because of my background in Jamaica, that I grew up in the country area, it's low socioeconomic status the families have around there. And as a result, the schools reflect the background of the families in those communities. And compared to people who grew up in Kingston or Montego Bay, they have more access. So I think the key term for me is access, having access or lacking access to resources and opportunities. But later on, when I left, I graduated from high school and community college, then went into college, teachers college in Mandeville. I realized that, the school, because I wasn't paying attention to schools. I played soccer, which is football, for the school, and a little bit of cricket. I didn't play much cricket, but soccer, yes. And when playing soccer or football, we call it in Jamaica, the Caribbean, and in Europe and so on. You start to play against other schools, and in sports, you understand what schools you're playing against based on the type of equipment that they have. They can produce Gatorade or drinks for their team. When they come to play against you, you can only drink water from that cooler, the igloo, as they call it. You get oranges from their team, you get water. So you're constantly drinking water while they're drinking Gatorade and other things. And then afterwards, they might pull up. We pass people pulled up at a KFC, because in KFC in the Caribbean, it's a big deal, just like one of the meal, big deal, meal. And what type of school they're coming from based on where they stop to buy food, or what type of bags they carry with them, with their equipment or gear for soccer. So you started to look around, and you see how the schools are not equal, as you said. They're not the same, and it's not equitable, with the type of systems that they set up in it. But on in terms, because you mentioned academic, that when you were in high school, well, whichever school you were in, public school, that the academic performance in public school is a little bit less than the one that you got in private school. And it's kind of different. Well, it's similar to your experience, my experience in Jamaica, but it's also not private school that is different, but it's public school among public schools. So you have some public schools that are not doing so well because they lack resources, and they lack the alumni associations, the old boy or old girl or whatever association of past students. They're lacking that, and so they're not raising money to create initiatives around the school and to support that system. Old boys or alumni association might buy buses for the school, 1 or 2 buses. They might provide lunch. They cater for cafeteria initiative with food, so students can go there and they eat, they're healthy. It's not so much with the populace among different types of school. And then you mentioned academic, and academic performance is another sore point among those who have and those who have not. So we really have to look at those areas where we can say, can we do better here, to level the playing field in some areas. One of the areas I looked at is the opportunities that students will have after they leave that school. So one of the areas that we probably could talk about is networking and connecting students with career choices or a pathway. So if, let's, for example, they go to high school, how are the schools connecting students to a pathway to success in terms of career successfulness? Successes. What does that look like when you look at certain types of school? What are the opportunities they're providing for high school students, right across the board? High school, how are they different in terms of providing a platform for students to shine and to develop their craft when they come into these schools?
Well, the thing is that high school is almost too late, from my experience, because the amount of information that you get in elementary school, at least here we have elementary, middle, and high school, right? So I know it's Jamaica, it's elementary and goes to high school, but it's around, I would say, then between the ages of 10 and 13 that the skills that you've been working on and the knowledge that you've had, that you've learned that far, it's starting to materialize in actual practical ways. So, and it's especially obvious in schools that have the resources that you've described, because resources give you an opportunity to practice. That's the thing. It gives you more opportunity to try out the skills that you've developed. So let's say, for example, something as simple as just having an auditorium. Now, some schools don't have auditoriums, or the auditorium is used specifically for only what they call important events. Whereas at a school that doesn't see it that way, that has a different relationship with resources, where they feel like, okay, no, we realize that the goal that we have for our students is to develop very strong public speaking skills, because leaders are required to be able to communicate well. So we have to give them as many opportunities as possible to do so. So they create around their curriculum and around events and public school and public events at the school opportunities for students to get up on stage. And it's as simple as that, giving them an opportunity to be able to articulate all of the language and vocabulary that they've learned, to be able to express clearly the ideas that they're grappling with in their education, to be able to express themselves. I mean, this is a basic skill that you cannot get good at unless you do it, right? So that's the difference as far as how resources are manipulated in order to improve a skill set, but it's intentional. And I can't stress that enough, because you can have resources and not use them to the benefit and to the advantage of the student population. So I think a lot of times the difference that I find is how schools perceive their students and the goals that they have in mind for those students to achieve. And I'm going to give a very specific example. When I started in New York City government in education, I came in as a consultant, and I was participating in what they called a longitudinal study. It's a 3-year study. I was involved in collecting data the first year about schools, and specifically about the improvement that children make when they are taught by a specific teacher. So it was, this idea that, the number of hours that a teacher would be in a class with a student is what they were going to rate the teacher on, as far as whether or not the teacher was successful in teaching that child. Now, thankfully, they've abandoned that particular project, because the fact is, as we all know, when we're in education, a kid comes from their own environment, with their own background, their own experience, with their own day and their own limitations, and the teacher cannot mitigate all of those other elements that are going to contribute to them not being able to learn. However, that's not my point. My point is that I spoke to hundreds of schools, and every school had different ideas around their students. So some people, when I called, and they'd say, "Oh, you're calling about our scholars and and our rising graduates and this, that, and the other." Whereas another group of administrators at a different school would even discourage me. "Why are you even bothering to collect data on these kids? They're not even going to finish high school. They're never going to make it." Now, just imagine the difference having that kind of administrator teach your child versus the other. So already the expectation, regardless of the resources at the school, but the expectation that that school has about whether or not that child will succeed will impact every single thing that they do with that child. Everything that they teach them, how well they teach them, the amount of time that they spend teaching them, or the fact is if they've given up on them, how can the children themselves think that they can achieve themselves?
Yeah.
So this is where it, and also, just taking it back just quickly to Jamaica, I remember I had a cousin who grew up in Kingston, and she talked about she was a runner, and she had all the best shoes and the outfit and the this, that, and the other. And she went up against some country students that didn't even have shoes. And she said those country kids beat them miserably. They went, and they could not keep up with those barefoot kids. So even though they had all of the right clothes, the right shoes and this, that, and the other, I just want to point out the fact that that's where resources are not an advantage. That hard work and talent is going to prevail when they're put up against only resources. You know what I mean? Everybody has to be working hard in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree. So the part that what I heard you said earlier, with the schools that give opportunity, for example, you mentioned public speaking and so on. So it's based on the goal of the school, what that or the themes that schools share, and that's what they want to focus on. And a lot of times it's really based on the ability of that school leader to guide the staff, the teaching staff or faculty in that manner, so that they can in turn realize the vision of the leader and then guide students towards that, because they probably have grown up in an era where public speaking or entrepreneurship was a thing, and they said, no, our students really need this. Or they have been at the forefront of these innovative change and going to conferences like the one we're putting on for the Caribbean for school leaders. And they say, well, these are the trends in society. These are the trends that are happening in developed countries. So we need to get on board if they're from a developing country. We need to get on board. Even the developed countries, they're constantly having these seminars and conferences for school leaders to rethink and reimagine educational leadership, and for them to take back to their schools some of these initiatives and implement them. So it's, I think where we're getting to is that policies need to change, or policy needs to be implemented so that schools can become more equitable for students' growth, regardless of the society they find themselves existing in that, whichever low socioeconomic situation they find themselves in, or rich economic situations they find themselves in terms of these communities. So let's talk about who provide, as you mentioned, you kind of alluded to it earlier on, providing opportunities for these schools, because it's not just on the government of our area. You mentioned about in certain residential areas, the schools that flourish because of taxpayers' dollars. These suburban areas, they actually get more for their school because of the taxes are high and so on. So it actually contributes to the learning development of these students, who will in turn give back to the school, and it rolls over. But what about those areas that have very low income and that they're not doing so well right now? Because there must be some ways that we can tap into, they can tap into some aspect of societal development and partnership in order to build their school, for it not to go down. I was talking to a principal recently, and the community engagement that this principal brought out in low socioeconomic situations. So there are ways in which we can implement strategies to kind of like fuel the change and innovation towards growth.
Yes, I want to agree with you 100%. I mean, I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea that it's money that is absolutely essential to success for education within the whatever school environment. It contributes, obviously, because there's certain amount of resources that you need to have that need to be replenished, maintained in order for kids to have continuous access to it. That's true. But the fact is that money is not the solution. We have an overabundance of money available to us in a lot of countries that are not put to good use. So keep that in mind, that you can have the resources and not use them in a way where it is distributed equitably and not thoughtfully implemented to achieve the goal that you have in mind, a positive goal you have in mind for student achievement. So what we're talking about here is the idea behind what the goal is, again, for the student is critical.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people find or believe that they're at a disadvantage because they don't have money. What they don't understand is that there is a human equity, time that's spent with families in community to build the quality of learning, not the quantity of learning, but the quality of learning. I'm going to give a really good example of this. I remember my mom, who did grow up in Jamaica, who saying to me that her mom had a chalkboard and a little piece of chalk. She didn't even know how her mom was even able to write with this chalk because it was so tiny. But she taught her all of her letters and started to teach her words with this chalkboard. And she remembered that since she had to erase and write again, that she had to remember those words. So she didn't have the advantage of having these luxurious books where the words are in there and she can go back and relook at it. She really needed to know those words because her mom was moving on to another one. She got so good at one point that she realized that she could actually look at her mom's paper and read her mom's writing upside down and kind of eavesdrop and see what her mom was doing.
Mhm.
So I'm saying that the quality of learning, I know a lot of kids can't do that now. God forbid you try to write in cursive. They really don't see it. They don't understand it at all.
Like foreign to them.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But you can't say that they don't have access to books. They have more library books than we've ever had, right? They're
And
not
on their phones.
and on their phones. I mean, they're surrounded by information.
Yeah.
They have the resources. So I just want to point out that resources don't equal learning, right? So learning comes from the goal of ensuring that learning takes place and that you have in mind the end goal of what it is you want them to come away with. So if you take time with a child, spending time, even a month, just going over letters and
Mm-hmm.
sounds,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be time better spent than handing them, an expensive tablet where
Mm-hmm.
they may see it and they may interact and they might look like they're very sophisticated, but they still aren't engaging in learning. Remember, you being an educator, you will know the more senses you use, the more your learning is committed to long-term memory. So you want to you want to speak the letter, you want to trace the letter, you want to use your hands you want to feel the pen in your hand as you write it, as you see it. These are the foundational ways that you have to use in order to ensure learning. And so I would, obviously my mom ended up going on to do her, her bachelor's in philosophy, her master's in public administration, and then her law degree at Georgetown Law School. And when it came to the point of reading, textbooks that were, as big as a dictionary, that was something she had plenty of practice doing, but
Yeah.
not because it was on fancy technology. You understand? So I
Yeah.
don't want anybody to come away thinking that you need fancy technology to be competitive with people who have it. That's not what you need. You need time to spend, and you need people who love you, that support you and provide space for you to have that learning, and that learning that needs to happen at home as well as in the classroom. A lot of people are limited in their thinking that the school is the only place where you learn. You learn everywhere. You take
Yeah.
every opportunity to learn. And what most people don't understand is while you're at home, a space needs to be dedicated and time needs to be made where there's quiet time for learning in
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody's home. I don't, no matter how small it is, time has to be set aside, and that's the way that you become successful
Yeah. Yeah. I
academically.
totally agree. Totally agree with all of what you're saying. With so this school it really need to put some effort in terms of leadership. And the way it works is to get the right fit. Okay, we talk about in mentorship, we talk about the right fit for a mentee. I believe that a school needs to get the right fit of leader for that school in order to lead the students and lead in a community of that nature. And drive, because what I'm looking at too is, yeah, they don't have resources, or we have resources, but how are you going to manage the resources so that you can capitalize on learning? As you said, the resources are useless if you're not using them for the right purposes.
Mhm.
And you could have an abundance of know-how and to get somewhere, but if you don't know where you're going, the resources cannot help you, and the material will be useless or used for something else. And somebody will say, well, I didn't use it for that. I didn't know we could use it for that. But you have a ton of it. It's like some people who grow up having a whole lot of money, and they're like, why didn't you have this or that or this? And they're like, wow, I didn't know. I had no idea. I had no idea I could do that with it. It's the same thing with it, but it's the managing of the resources, which the right fit for an educational leader in a particular school, whoever the organization is, who are choosing these leaders, need to be capable of putting the right fit in these schools. And we just need to stay away from too much politics when it comes on to public school and leadership, because of course you have corruption on one side, and then you have the policy and politics on the other side that we need to maneuver. We are going to focus on some of the structures that we're looking at in terms of comparing schools when we look at the second part of comparing schools. But final thoughts, Judy, about the development of the leadership and the placement of leadership in schools. What are your final thoughts regarding the steps that these governing bodies should take when placing leaders in these schools, in order, it's really geared towards providing equity for students?
I think it's very important to make sure that not only do they have the foundational ability clearly to be able to understand what real learning looks like, but that differentiated understanding about what it looks like for different individual students in order to benefit the population at large. Differentiation cannot be emphasized enough. Each child is unique and they need to be treated as such, but also not to be limited by what they have available to them, but see it as an opportunity to be creative, to make the most of whatever it is they have. So a child who uses string and straw or popsicle sticks all to make a letter will never ever forget that letter.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't need to be high technology. So we need leaders who come in, take an assessment of what they have, and see how they can turn it into something great, something that really brings about all of that education that they've learned about what learning requires and apply it based on what they have,
Mhm.
and identify what out of the resources that they have available to them, opportunities for children to practice,
Mhm.
not just be the passive receivers of information, but be those active participants in their learning, where they are themselves not only explaining how they learn to the teacher, but to their fellow students, so that they can all develop the confidence that comes with learning and the love of learning that'll keep them on the right track to success in their future.
Yeah, yeah, well said. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us with on EduTalk. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something, and we do need your feedback. Write to us at edusolutionsintl@gmail.com or admin@educationsolutionsinternational.org. You can even look us up on LinkedIn. We have Education Solutions International LinkedIn page. It's our business page. And you can visit our website at edusolutionsintl.org. That's edusolutionsintl.org. We're going to have a second part to this next time you see us, okay? So what good, have a wonderful week, and come back ready again to participate. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, Judy, for coming on and
Of
for sharing.
course.
Love the expertise. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.